Well, good morning. If you are in Santa Barbara, good afternoon. If you're in Boston, which is where my colleague Lauren, who's technically co-hosting this for us, is at the moment. And good evening, if like me, you're sitting in Europe. Not an English accent, but I'm speaking to you from Italy, near Florence. And welcome to our Fireside Chat, the World Upshift Forum's Fireside Chat, which today is with Dr. Michael Kearney. Just before we begin, we give a little plug for World Upshift. You can find us at worldupshift.org. And if you'd like to know more about World Upshift Forum, you can log in as a member. You can sign up and get credentials. That's free. And you can go to our members area, which we call the Harbour. And from there, you can find out about other steps that you can take to be more engaged, more involved, more informed about the World Upshift Forum. And we would very much welcome your presence, and we'd love to see you there. So that's worldupshift.org. And one of the things that we offer our Hummingbird members and also guests of our guests, and today our guest is, as I say, Dr. Michael Kearney, is the opportunity to come and participate in these fireside chats. And for you, those of you who are watching for the first time, the way this works, I'm going to talk to Michael for half an hour. It's going to be more Michael than me. It's not a kind of tough interview. It's an opportunity for Michael to share some of his wisdom and insights and tell us a little bit about his story. That will run through till past. And then after that, we will turn it over to you, our dear audience, for questions. And the way to ask questions is to put your question in the chat, and then Lauren will get the questions to me via WhatsApp, and I will ask the questions to Michael. Now, it may very well be that Lauren has paraphrased a little bit your question. That's certainly a possibility. And it may also be that I somehow have misunderstood your question and I asked it in a way that you didn't intend. And if that happens, it's just a genuine mistake on our part. And you can simply put your question again in the chat and say, that's not the question I asked. This is a question I'd like to have answered, and then we'll have another shot at it. And if you keep your questions short and Michael keeps his answers brief, then we will, I hope, be able to get all of your questions in, possibly even time for a second round. So once again, for those of you just tuning in, my name is Roger Casali from the World Upshift Forum at worldupshift.org. My guest tonight, I'm speaking to you from near Florence in Italy, and our guest today is Dr. Michael Kearney. And Michael, good evening, welcome. I think I can see you're in your study in Santa Barbara and the sun seems to be shining.
Yeah, it is almost. Yeah, and I am here in Santa Barbara. Yeah, and good morning, good evening to everybody.
And I think one of the things people notice straight away is that I know there are lots of Irish people in the United States, and California is presumably no exception, but nobody can mistake your Irish accent. So you were born in Ireland, I think. That's where it all started, yeah?
Yeah, I'm Irish, and I was born in Ireland and spent the first third of my life there in school and medical school, and began my work there in hospice and palliative care in Ireland.
What took you to medical school? What was it that made you want to be a doctor?
Well, probably the short answer is I don't know. I think I came from a very medical family, and so I sort of found myself in medicine, and actually halfway through medicine, I really wasn't so sure this is what I wanted to do. I was not very interested in the sciences, and I was hoping it would improve once I got to actually meet real people. But then I saw a lot that kind of disturbed me in the hospital when I was there as a student, as in particularly people who are very sick and near the end of their life, not being very well cared for at times. And so I was about to leave medicine and pursues my other interests in English literature, movies, whatever. I wasn't sure what direction, but I was going to leave medicine, and I sat down with a mentor of mine at the time and told him that this is what I was thinking, and he said, "Well, before you do that, um, please do me a favor. Visit St. Christopher's Hospice in London. It's a place of healing." That was the phrase he used, and that somehow piqued my interest, and that was my first contact with hospice. I was still a medical student when I went and spent a week there, and I actually experienced during my visit um, something of that sense of healing, even though I was with people who were at the very end of their life, their bodies were failing, but I experienced a sense of wholeness in the people I met, their aliveness, their presence, their joy, and that deeply touched me. And that kind of decided me on staying in medicine and heading in this direction of hospice and palliative care.
Well, I think we have a lot to be grateful to you for. We have a lot to be grateful to your mentor for, because it sounds as if that person, that man, opened a door for you, and you went through that, and you've dedicated, in a sense, the rest of your life to that. So that was obviously quite a critical moment. And what did that person, that mentor, see? Were they a doctor themselves? Were they a professor? I mean, what did they? How did you get to the point where they suggested something quite different, wasn't it? Because it wasn't the path that other medical students necessarily were taking. Some of them might have done. What did he? You said it was a man. What did he see? What did he see in you, Michael? What was it that made him suggest that to you?
It's hard to say, but it was in the context of a retreat I was on, and I think maybe he sensed a yearning, a sort of a spiritual yearning, a searching, and I think he sort of named it correctly when he used the word healing. That I was somehow, yes, I was studying medicine, but I was really somehow on a deeper search for healing, what healing meant, what it meant to be a healer for my own sake, and perhaps what I could bring to others. But I think he picked up on that kind of spiritual hunger for a sort of quest I was on.
So, since we have here your scientific background, you said you weren't very good at sciences, but you was good enough to be a medical doctor, so that must have been pretty good. And you had your interest in spirituality, and you had your creativity as well. You said about writing. In a sense, this person saw a way to bring, rather for these things to be in conflict, a way perhaps to bring these different aspects of yourself together through your work that started then when you went to London. So tell us about that. You got to London, got to this hospital, you started doing things, and you said you noticed that in medical school. People weren't really talking about healing. They weren't taught in the context of end of life, palliative care. This was something really that aroused your curiosity. You got yourself into that situation there with the help of your mentor, and you went from there. What I sort of sense is that the next doors and so on, the way that they went after that was a lot to do with you opening up this whole area. And is that right? I mean, it was very underdeveloped when you started. Nothing to compare with how it is today, and how it is today is also partly thanks to the work that you've been doing. Yeah. Well, how did you find this when you got to London?
Well, I kind of see myself as being very blessed and very lucky to be in the right place at the right time, So, yeah, I found myself coming to St. Christopher's, which was the very first of the modern hospices, to work with Cicely Saunders, who was the pioneer of the modern hospice movement. While I was there, I met with Balfour Mount, who is the pioneer of palliative care. I've just been very lucky that my paths have crossed with theirs. They're the pioneers. Yes, it's true. When I went back to Ireland, I was the first palliative care physician in Ireland. Hospice had been there for a long time. In fact, one of the oldest hospices opened up in 1863, I think it was, Our Lady's Hospice in Dublin. And I went back there as medical director, but I started palliative care in the hospital. So yes, I've been very involved in palliative care there. And then when I came to the States, I brought palliative care, the hospital was just starting a program. So I've been able to be at the kind of cutting edge of some new programs. But, kind of weaving through all of that has been, in a way, the continuity has been a search to understand more deeply what healing really means, what it means to become whole. And one of my friend Bal Ferman says, it's possible to die healed. It's possible to, and indeed, my sense is that deep within us, we have this kind of deep whole, this intact wholeness, called by different names, but Matthew Fox calls it original blessing. From a Buddhist perspective, it's seen as Buddha nature. We have this wholeness within us, and it's more a kind of a quest to remember that. And so my journey has been in parallel to my kind of doing my day-to-day palliative care stuff. I've been, searching through depth psychology, through different kind of spiritual paths, through therapy, through psychoanalysis, through being on a Buddhist path, being on the Red Road, all these different sort of elements to understand more deeply, and not just understand it conceptually, but to try and come into that experientially. And part of what I've sensed all the way through is that that's not just a parallel journey to what I've been doing in my medical work. That actually it really matters to my quality of presence, who I am at the bedside. And Michael Baylant, the English psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, said, "We are the medicine. We are the most powerful medicine that we bring to the bedside, that we bring to our patients, that we bring to our world." And so over time, those two kind of interweaving threads have sort of become one in that way.
I'm not interrupting because this is an absolutely beautiful thread, and I'm sure that I hope everyone who's watching is enjoying it as much as I am. And but there's some extraordinary things in what you just said. We are the medicine. We need to explore that a little bit more, I think, in this conversation, and that it's possible to die healed. To die healed. That's again very, very striking phrase. And this idea about wholeness and completeness. In fact, that chimes with what Rashmi was saying to us last week, actually, about the complete woman, complete man, completeness, and how that comes from within. There's a nice connection there with what we were talking about in a completely different context last week. But I want to take just back for a second, and then we will. They were in London. You came across and you were talking about some of the themes that you started to weave together when you were in London, and that have followed you all the way through your career, through Ireland, and then across to the United States. And of course, so what you're saying to us is that you were in London for a while, and then with that pioneering team, part of that team, and then you brought that experience back to Ireland, and you became a pioneer in Ireland and got it going, and then you came to America. But just let me ask, you mentioned Cicely Saunders. What did you learn from Cicely Saunders, would you say, just briefly? What was the thing that really, that must have been a great experience, and working with her. What, just in a nutshell, what was the thing that really stands out in your memory that you learned from her?
Well, she talks about a conversation she had with a young, dying Polish. He'd been a fighter pilot in the RAF during the Second World War. He was now dying, and she was caring for him. And she said to him, "What can I do for you?" And he said to her, "I only want what's in your mind and in your heart." And that's what she brought back into medicine. She brought the heart back into medicine. Not just in a Pollyanna way, but in a deep, in the sense of our deep, uh, that deep inner place of energetic connectedness and openness and warmth and caring. And she found a way of bringing back to the bedside, but she did it in a way that really combined it with the mind, with the best that science has to offer. Um, uh, and that's what I learned from her. And that's what I learned from her. And I kind of was worried from at times that my specialty, palliative medicine, had become kind of too enamored with the mind side and too delighted that it had been accepted as a specialty within the kind of the medical world, and had lost a little bit its heart roots. And so that's been a concern of mine. And so that's really what I learned from her, the value of, and the possibility of bringing both together. And we can bring both together if we are the medicine, if we bring our heart to the bedside, but using our mind in service in the best possible way.
Well, that's very, very beautiful. And thank you for sharing that memory with us and expressing it so beautifully, if I may say so. And it must have been very inspiring to you at the time. It's inspiring hearing you talking about it now. And I would be very, in the context of palliative care, but it seems to me that that's a kind of vision, that's a statement that's inspiring to all of us at any time in our life. And that so much of what you're actually saying to us is relevant, not just in the context of end of life, but in the context of all of life. But we need to travel on. We need to travel on. We need to get you out of St. Christopher's in London. You went to Ireland. You built up your career there. But I want to get you across to the States now and close to what you're doing now. Just briefly, how long were you in Ireland for before you came across to the United States?
I think I was back in Ireland for 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you established quite a reputation there. It's where I noticed from your book cover, we're going to talk about your book in a second. There's a quote from Mary Robinson, the Irish president, human rights activist, and so on. You didn't be bumped in. She came to you. Yeah.
We were, when she was president of Ireland. We
right.
opened a new palliative care unit, and she came by, and yeah.
And what kind of impression did she make on you?
Oh, I'm just, she's one of my heroes, Mary Robinson. She's just a person of such integrity and such intelligence and such a sense of justice or injustice. So she really brings into the whole work with climate, she really brings, a yearning for climate justice and how we can't really do kind of good work for our environment without really including that whole, the injustices that go with it, particularly affecting the most vulnerable. So she's a real sensitivity to that. And she's not afraid to speak her truth, as she did at the last COP 28, I think it was, when she called out the chairman of the conference and said, we really need to phase out fossil fuels, and can we commit to that? And anyway, that's another.
Okay, we have to have her on a fireside chat. Well,
I admire her courage.
So she obviously remembers you. She obviously likes you. She likes your book because, sometimes when you ask people to write a quote about your book, they write a line or so. She's written almost an essay about your book. We'll come to this in a second. So there you were. You built this up in Ireland. It was obviously you left a great legacy in Ireland, and then something brought you to the United States. Yeah, and was it fear or was it love? Which of the two?
It was love. It was love. It was love. I had come here to do some study at Pacifica Graduate Institute here in Santa Barbara, in a particular way of working with dreams, because I was writing a book on working with people's dreams at the end of life, approaching death. And I met my beloved Radhule, who was on the same conference, and fell in love, and here I am.
Here you are. So how much of your career now has been in the United States, would you say?
Probably about half. You know, when I made the move here, I had to sort of begin again. I was sort of mid-career, 25 years into palliative care, but I had to go back and do basically all my medical exams again. I had to do a residency in internal medicine again. So it was back to square one. But I was lucky because I was doing my residency in Cottage Hospital here in Santa Barbara at exactly the moment. Again, you know, it's just talk about being in the right place at the right time. It was exactly the moment. They had already plans in place to start a palliative care team, but they didn't really have anybody to do that. And it was just so I was able to do my residency and start the palliative care program simultaneously.
I'm really struck by how, these different times in your life, you went to St. Christopher's, then you went to Ireland, you were pioneering things in Ireland, you come to the States and you're helping to develop it here, more or less. You started from scratch, but in a sense, the palliative care was starting from scratch. What I'm hearing was certainly where you
Well,
are.
not in the States. It was very
No,
well
where you
established.
are, but where you are in the States, yeah. And so you were having to lead that forward, and all the time, these other strands that you've been talking about are woven into your story, and of course, we've just touched on the issue of the nature and the environment and climate before you were talking about your interest in writing, and so you continue to work as a palliative care physician and professionally, but all of your other interests have been woven into that, your spiritual interests and so on. And that's brought you into contact with other interesting people as well, hasn't it? I mean, I know I've said we want to talk about you, but part of your story is the people that you've met along the way. And one person that, who are you tell us, who are the people who've been sort of particularly influential on you recently, I think, in particular?
Well, I would probably say four people really quickly. I would say I've been lucky enough to meet and become be mentored by and become friends with Joanna Macy, who's an extraordinary 94 going on 95-year-old living up in Berkeley. She's an environmental activist, a poet, a Buddhist scholar. Who's developed an incredible body of work called The Work That Reconnects. So I've been lucky enough to work very closely with Joanna. I've been lucky enough to be included in the fireplace of two Native American teachers who've become friends, as well as ongoing mentors, Wolf and Lisa Wapipa. And I've been lucky enough to attend ceremony with them over 15 years, sweat lodges and vision quests, and been to Sundance with them. So I've been really blessed to be included on that road with them. And then in the background, there's been a journey into Tibetan Buddhism, and I've been lucky enough to visit and sit at the feet of the Dalai Lama a few times and met with him briefly, personally, and really find his teachings inspirational. And the fourth I'd mention is the Bodhi tree. And I see the Bodhi tree as a very much a living teacher, one of my mentors. And I've been and sat under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya in India. I've been lucky enough to be there 3 times. And so when I sit and think of my teachers, Bodhi tree is among them.
One of them is a Bodhi tree, and we may have. We're going to hear more about the Bodhi tree. We've got you now from Santa Barbara, where we want you under the Bodhi tree, because that's going to help us to get into your wonderful book. But of course, your book is not called Becoming Tree; it's called Becoming Forest. Why is that?
Well, do you want me to tell you a little bit about the book?
Yes, it'd be great. Just briefly, yeah.
That answer. So very briefly, the book is, the inspiration for the book came under the Bodhi tree.
Yeah.
And I had gone to India to do a vision quest under the Bodhi tree. Okay. And I had become very concerned about, I've always been worried. I've been very connected with the natural world always. And I've been very worried about what's happening to our, to the environment with the climate crisis. This became very personal all of a sudden when my first grandchild was born. I now have 6 grandchildren. So just being with them and thinking of the world that they're going to grow up in, and thinking of the world that all our young people and all the grandchildren are growing up in, has become my main concern. And I had gone to India to sit under the Bodhi tree with the question, what can I possibly do for my grandchildren, for all the grandchildren? And what came to me as I sat under the Bodhi tree was write a book. And not just another nonfiction kind of thing, but write a story. And so the story of the book is about a young girl. Her name is Aisling, a young Irish woman. She's just 18 at the start of the book. And she's given a quest by her grandfather. And her grandfather is a palliative care doctor who has noticed that those of his patients who have somehow come into their heart's estate, who've somehow come into a sense of deep inner rootedness within themselves. And as they have really come into their heart, they've lost their fear of death. And they not only can face their death with a sort of an openness and a peacefulness, but they become wounded healers to everyone around them. So he's noticed this, and he would like to be able to prescribe this for his granddaughter, Aisling, and indeed for all the grandchildren. So he calls it deep security. He says, if somebody has this deep inner security, they can face any uncertainty. Like a little girl in her mother's arms, if that little girl, if the mother steps into a war zone, but if she's held securely in her mother's arms, she's able to face a very unsafe situation with less fear because she's held in security. And so that's the quest. He asks Aisling, can you take this idea of deep security and find a way of passing it on to young people in a language, in a form that they'll understand, so it can really make a difference to them? And so the book is a story of her quest to find, first of all, what does it mean? She understands it conceptually, but she has to discover it for herself, what it means personally. And then, how do I possibly introduce this and talk about this and help others to find this sense of deep inner security within themselves? So that's the quest of the book. And it all began under the Bodhi tree.
That's really, really beautiful. I'm trying to decide whether the Aisling or the grandfather, which one is Michael Kearney. Maybe it's a little bit of you in both of them. The younger Michael starting out with your creativity, and the one today with all the experience and wisdom that you have gained from your long career and continuing career as a palliative care physician. And it seems to me that you're back, in a sense, you've looped back to where you were when you first started out, with this creativity and this wish to write books or maybe make films and so on, but drawing now on, that mentor of yours right at the start, who understood that there was a way to kind of bring these different strands of yourself together, your interest in spirituality, your interest in science and medicine and healing, and this message that you have for us about it's possible, as you said before, to die healed. It seems to me a very, very important message that you have for the whole world, and not least in the context of what's going on now in relation to climate change. So you brought all these different things together, which is very, very rich. So we're coming to the end of half an hour. I want to bring in, I think, normally with these conversations, we would link a little bit what the work that you're doing, becomingforest.com. The website is now live, I believe, and the book is available, and there's going to be a project as well related to the book. Normally we would start to talk a little bit about how that relates to Upshift and so on, but I think that that's been a theme right the way through. right the way through, because the Upshift is about from the heart, it is about transformation, it is about all of these things. And I know that there are a lot of questions coming in, because Lauren is sending me the messages on WhatsApp. So I might come back with a couple more questions of my own, if I may, towards the end. I think we want to just seamlessly go through now to some of the questions that are coming through. So there's one question here from Kabir. And the question is, I can just read this out exactly as I've got it. How does one assist others who are conscious and want to remember? Yeah.
Thanks, Kabir. Well, I would say what comes to me is two things come to me. One is being the change we want to see in the world. So I think actually being present in that inner rootedness. I sometimes talk about to survive the tsunami of suffering, we have to let it flow through us. Our feet rooted in what isn't afraid and what doesn't die. And so, I think really, coming back to we are the medicine, I think that's, for me, is just such an important message and practice, more than anything we say or even do with the people we accompany. So that's the first thing. And there's a line from one of the Psalms that goes, deep calls to deep in the roar of waters. Deep calls to deep in the roar of waters. So that for me is where it begins, by being there as the medicine, as the healing, as the heart, as the caring heart. That's where it begins. And then I think what we're thinking about exactly your question, really, with the Becoming Forest project, which gives me just an opportunity to say a little bit about it. It's what we're offering is what we call deep resilience training for uncertain times. So we're thinking about different ways of helping, coming back to the Bodhi tree. When Aisling looks at the Bodhi tree, when she's sitting there, she sees a mushroom growing out of the side of the Bodhi tree. And that is actually what I saw when I was there, sitting in the torrential rain. There was a mushroom coming out of the Bodhi tree. And that seemed somehow really significant and important, but I had no idea what it meant. What I think it now means, what I'm understanding more deeply, is the understanding that we really are mycelial awareness. We really are that underground living web. That is our primary identity. But we get over-identified with ourselves as mushroom or even as tree. But we really are forest. We really are that interconnected web. So we're thinking about, well, how can we, lots of different possible doorways that will be kind of specific, culturally specific, individually specific, to help individuals to remember that they are forest, not trees, that they are the living web, the mycelial awareness, just to use some of those metaphors. But
beautiful.
So that could be something as simple as we teach particular meditations, we teach practices, we do a lot of nature connection, really believing that nature is our ultimate teacher in this. Nature is that living, interconnected, vibrant web. So it is a matter of remembering, as you've put it so beautifully. And so yeah, going out, putting our hands in the soil, planting trees, tending the forest, finding ways of doing that at the bedside by bringing in a big bowl of earth for somebody just to put their hands into the earth and close their eyes and just really be with that sensation of the earth. Just finding, creative, interesting ways of just leading us back to earth.
Absolutely beautiful. So you actually bring earth into the hospice, into the center. You actually bring that with you as part of the experience.
Have done, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
if
just
somebody isn't well enough to leave their bedside, I mean,
yeah. And just come back though for a second to this. Just help us to understand. Thank you for Kabir for the questions, and please do keep your questions coming through to Michael. I've got plenty more to ask myself, but don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat to Michael while we've got him with us. Yes, because you were. I think you mentioned to me earlier that it was Joanna Macy who's had this idea of being we're forest rather than tree. Can you just explain a little bit more about what perhaps she meant by that and what you mean by that? And it's obviously something really important because that's what you're calling the book, is what you're calling the project. How should we think about that? Yeah, what difference does it make to me or anybody else to think of myself rather as a forest rather than as a tree? I love it. I love the phrase, and it seems to have a lot to do with that sense of connectedness. As you say that we remember this. It's not that we discover it; it's that we remember that this is actually how we are. Really, human beings. We are all connected with each other and with nature. What's in your mind when you think about becoming forest? What's the difference?
I mean, so much. I just maybe take out a thread or two and see where it goes. But at the end of the book, it's 30 years in the future, and Aisling's daughter Tara asks her mom, you used to talk a lot when I was little about deep security and how Granddad asked you to did you ever figure out what deep security was? And so Aisling stops and thinks about it for a bit, and then she says, I let go of that question a long time ago because I couldn't get it with my head, but with my mind, with my conceptual mind. But since I've come back, she's come back to Ireland, and since I've been planting trees, and she's been planting trees and tending a forest. And she said, when I'm among the trees, I understand. That's when I understand what deep security is. And for me, it's no longer even deep security. I've kind of moved more to a sense of deep belonging. It's more deep belonging. And so it's that for her, it was planting trees. It was putting her hands in the earth. It was tending the earth, caring for the earth. For her partner, who is a Buddhist monk, who they joined forces, and for him, it's these Vajrayana and Mahamudra and Dzogchen practices from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that lead him into awareness, into a kind of a unitary awareness that we're all part of. And so, and then kind of one other just little piece to put in there, as I say, it's not all very linear, the way I'm responding to your question, but is, I've really been taken by how Merlin Sheldrake, talks about our entangled lives, and kind of, I listened to him talking recently, and he was talking about how really part of the reason we suffer so much is we over-identify as tree, we over-identify as human, we over-identify as mushroom. But really, our primary identity is the mycelial network, is the roots that connect us all, is the web that we're all part of. The bodies, the fruiting bodies the mycelium or the mushroom, the fruiting bodies of the roots and the mycelium or the trees. We too emerge from the earth and go back into the earth, but we become over-identified with that sort of sense of self and that reified sense of self. And so so it's kind of, again, back to remembering. I mean, and I don't know if some of those metaphors
Okay.
in it.
Okay, you're explaining it beautifully, and using such powerful imagery that we could all relate to. But what I'm sensing is that a lot of this comes from a very deep place and also comes from other traditions, and it's not always easy to kind of import those into, get them to cross borders from Tibet to the United States, and get them to cross boundaries from spirituality into the world of science. And so there you have your book and your creativity, and now your project, and your way of actually telling the story that allows people to get emotionally engaged with the content of what you're saying in a way that can be very helpful to them, even in the extreme situation that you're describing of people at the end of life. But that's a story that can enrich and engage us and inspire and help us to in so many ways throughout life. And we've got a very interesting question here from Jeanette, which gives me the opportunity to thank Jeanette Wyman, who introduced us, and to put that on record. My thanks to Jeanette for having done that. And Jeanette says, do you see a barrier to engaging in this level of wisdom and practice for people who are living in very underprivileged circumstances, where their battle to survive has to take much of their energy? And if you do, are different approaches needed, helpful to them? How does that work for people who are particularly, for whom this might, on the surface seem even more inaccessible? How do you work with them?
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette, and thanks for introducing me to Roger and Irvin and the World Upshift movement. Yeah, no, that's a really great question and a really important one, and kind of makes me think, back to Mary Robinson and how just the whole injustice aspect of what's happening with the climate crisis, and how it is affecting the most vulnerable and those that haven't generated all the warming gases that are causing the problem, but they're bearing the brunt of it nonetheless. And of course, then just looking at our world, on fire, but also at war, and the poverty and the migration. And yeah, no, you're so right. Absolutely, survival is top priority, and again, a couple of things come. One is, one of the things we're hoping to offer through the Becoming Forest project is sort of teaching first responders and training those who are going into war zones, as Médecins Sans Frontières, or World Food Kitchen, or people who are on the front line, actually in there doing that kind of work in the place of greatest need. But very much at risk in lots of ways. Their very lives at risk, but at risk over time of burnout as well, because of the kind of obstacles they're constantly up against. And so that's another way of talking about what our Becoming Forest project is about. It's kind of a bit like self-care 2.0, that traditional self-care very much focuses on how can we mitigate the damage, how can we lessen the stress, how can we kind of have protective boundaries in a very stressful situation, and then have programs that regenerate and restore us when we're outside the workplace. And they work up to a point. that's traditional self-care, and it works up to a point. But in situations like you're describing, for the caregivers going in there or the first responders going in there, and obviously for the the individuals who are living that in a primary way, those kind of strategies either aren't an option or just not enough. And so that's why, we sometimes talk about the metaphor of, if you could imagine pain and suffering as a heaped teaspoon of salt. Well, if we try and hold that as an individual, it's a bit like putting that spoon of salt into a glass of water. And that glass of water is, unbearably salty. It's impossible to drink. It's impossible to bear. Whereas if we take that same spoon of water, that same spoon of salt, and walk to the edge of a vast mountain lake and put that spoon of water into the waters of that vast mountain lake, we're not going to taste. It's going to be undetectable. And that's the difference between kind of traditional models of self-care or self-care practices and deep resilience practices, or practices that help us to remember that we have within ourselves that vast mountain lake, that we are forest, that we are that network. And so working with those first responders, working with those caregivers to train them in those deep inner resilience practices, so they bring some of that mountain lake or that forest with them, into their work. It sustains them in their work, and it also affects their quality of presence, how their heart can stay open, and that makes a difference to those who are struggling to survive. But I do think, in addition to that, your question really brings me back to something I'm still thinking about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas of how to really make these kind of practices accessible to people who are living in the war zones, who are living in famine, who are living, in the forests that have been burnt down.
Tell us a little bit more about that, and just take a moment for all of us just to let that really sink in, what you've just said to us about the salt in the glass of water and the salt in the lake, because I think all of us have had overwhelming and painful and traumatic experiences of one kind or another through our life, and that is offering something really, really special. As a way of healing. And as you say, you're talking about it now in the context of war zones, and obviously the situation in Gaza comes to mind. And I just wonder if you can say a little bit more about the project. It's just starting. It's also called Becoming Forest, and how organizations like World Upshift can connect with you, and how that works. And you've mentioned Médecins Sans Frontières, you've mentioned other organizations. What is the offer that you'll make? What is the gift that you bring to the world through the project, and how do people connect with it, and what happens next?
So we're very beginning, we literally this morning made our landing page of our beta kind of Becoming Forest project live. And so the way to contact us is through that. And on that, there's actually a link to have a sort of a one-on-one conversation for 25 minutes with me, for kind of about deep resilience in terms of you as an individual, your life, or the project that you're part of, and to think together. What we'll be offering are practices, like I was describing a little bit in my answer to Kabir's question. We'll be offering meditations. We'll be offering practices. We'll be offering ways of getting involved, as in actively involved, like planting trees or tending the earth. We've got a really eclectic, interesting group of people, some of whom are therapists, some of whom are artists, some of whom are yoga teachers, some of whom are permaculture. And we're going to be offering a kind of a broad palette of opportunities to help to offer a pathway to the edge of the mountain lake, to offer a doorway back into the forest, into the mycelial network. So we'll be offering training. We'll be offering a series of seminars to train with groups, as well as the individual work. But another metaphor we're using is that if we think of it in terms of ecology, well, in terms of ecology, everything's part of the whole. But if we think in terms of inner ecology and outer ecology, if we just focus on tending outer ecology, as in really well-intentioned and courageous work as activists on the front line, but if we solely attend to outer ecology and tending it, we really are vulnerable to burnout. Whereas if we exclusively tend our inner ecology, the world is in danger of burning down, while we perhaps become enlightened, but there may be a disconnect if we exclusively see our spiritual path as being about ourselves primarily. So while the focus of becoming forest is primarily on tending our inner ecology, so we can better engage and tend with outer ecology. So the kind of most of our projects will focus on that. How can we come into a felt sense, an actual experience of our interdependence, our interconnectedness, with the living web? How can we do that? Yeah,
I think this will resonate very strongly. In fact, I'm getting messages. This is what the World Upshift is all about, and so I think it sits very, very well with what our intention in the World Upshift movement. And it's really an honour to have the opportunity to talk to you and to work with you. And we obviously wish you greater success with the project, and look forward also to onboarding some of the courses and some of the work, and providing a doorway to you through the World Upshift Odyssey, the platform that we are building for the World Upshift Forum. But just to remind everybody, I mean, the World Upshift movement, we're not the World Upshift movement, we're the World Upshift Forum. The World Upshift movement is not really a thing. It's a forest. It's going on all around us, and we can tend it in the way that you are tending it. And we look forward to working with you together on that. And just in the few minutes that we've still got, I just have also been asked this time by Lauren about the you also doing work with your wife, Radhule. And just before I introduce that topic, just to say I'm very much left with the impression of you being, I mean, you say you're not really the pioneer back at St Christopher's, but you learned about pioneering at St Christopher's at the very least, and then you took it to Ireland and you brought it to Santa Barbara, and you're still starting. And look what has happened to this, through the career and so on, and what you've done, and you're starting something else now, pioneering something now with Becoming Forest. And I'm sure this will also be well ahead of its time, and something that we will see grow and develop, and in a very rich way, just as the other things that you've been working with and pioneering and so closely related to this have done. And so I think that's really helpful to see the new project and the book in the context of the other pioneering work you've done through your career, and may equally bring much fruit, because the world is in great need of it. So the project in the few minutes, just about another project that you're doing that perhaps is also related, certainly related to Upshift, I think, perhaps related to what you've been talking to us about, this time with Radhule, your wife. And I think it's to do with meditation practices and so on. Is that?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for all you said there, Roger. I really I'm grateful. But yeah, Radhule and I are very much a team in all of this. And she is a clinical psychologist and a meditation teacher, and she's kind of led me into the kind of the whole the Buddhist path, and that's been so rich for me and continues to be. But we're both really, in a way, in the book. I think you picked it up right. I'm more. There's a little bit of Bran in me. There's a little bit of Aisling in me, and Radhule is very much a little bit of Greta, who's the grandmother at the beginning, but she's very much Dorje, the young Buddhist monk, because Aisling meets Dorje. He has left his monastery. It's actually based on the story of Mingyur Rinpoche, who's an amazing teacher and an abbot of a number of Tibetan monasteries, who left the monastery and walked for 4 years on a wandering retreat as a sadhu in India. And wrote a book about it. But so Dorje he has left his monastery because he's seen these incredible teachings on awareness. And if we can come out of conceptual mind and come into the heart of awareness, which is another way of talking for me, of moving from mushroom mind into mycelial mind. If we can make that shift, it's transformative. But he feels these teachings are too precious to be kept behind the walls of the monastery. So he's walking the roads of India, trying to find a way to make them accessible to our world. And that's very much Aisling and my quest as well. So that's where Radhule and I meet. And that we, with others, started a nonprofit called Mindful Heart Programs. And so we're already offering some of what I'm talking about through that. And mindfulheartprograms.org. And you'll see a range of different free meditations, which we offer every day. And Radhule and I do a group together every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. where we kind of share some of these themes and practices. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we wish you all the very best with that, and both of you, and we look forward to hearing about how that progresses, and we'll be very happy to elevate and to signpost this work. Because just to be clear again with our dear listeners and viewers, I mean, we want to identify work where Upshift work is going on, and I think you are an absolutely exemplary case study of that, and then signpost that and elevate that work, and that's really what we see our role as being in helping to catalyze an upshift in humanity at the World Upshift Forum. We're coming to the end of our hour, believe it or not. I just wonder whether there are some comments in the chat. Wonderful exploration. Thank you so much. Any final questions? But I think our time is come to the top of the hour, and the conversation is really just getting going, and will be continued. Just to remind everybody that you can order the book through the usual channels, Becoming a Forest, and order 2 copies, because a friend of yours or your partner will see it and they will grab it, and then you'll be wanting to read it. And so it's one of those books where remember to order 2 copies rather than one. Normally we say to people order 1 copy. I think in case of Michael's book, we say order 2 copies, because you're going to need that, at least 2 copies. And you can connect with the project, as Michael has said, at becomingforest.com. You can find World Upshift at worldupshift.org. You can sign up for free as a member, and that gets you into the members area, which we call our harbour. You might like to come to one of our meditations around the solstice, and that's a worldwide meditation. So we're doing this summer in the Northern Hemisphere and winter in the Southern Hemisphere. That'll be on the 20th of June from the Temple of Light at Ananda Assisi. Come join us for that. Details again you can find on the website, or on the World Upshift Odyssey platform, which you can access by signing up as a member on the website. So for now, it remains me to thank our dear audience. We've had a lovely audience here this evening, some from worldupshift.org, some from your friends and contacts, and Myra's Michael in Santa Barbara and California and around the world. Thank you for your presence, the gift of your presence, for your questions. Thank you to Jeanette again for introducing us, to Lauren for technically hosting this so beautifully as always, and not just being strong on the technical side, but helping us so much with developing the relationships for the World Upshift Forum. And thank you to you, Michael, for your life's work. May it long continue, and for having really listened to that mentor all those years ago and found a way to weave those beautiful threads together from your creative energies, your interest in spirituality, your interest in medicine and science, your dedication to those who are at the end of life, and your inspirational insights that can help all of us upshift, work towards and catalyze an upshift in humanity. I wish everybody a very nice day, wherever you are, whether it's lunchtime or dinner time or bedtime. And please come and see us again on the 4th of April, when we will have a fireside chat with Luigino Bottega, who's based in Budapest and is an author, communications expert, and he's the author of a book, How to Win at the Game of Life. And that seems to be something that will complement very well what we've been talking about today. So we're 1 minute over. Thank you very much indeed. And
thank you so much, Roger. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.